I found out my wife cheated on me with my father while I was somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico, sipping a bourbon at 36,000 feet. It was a 5-hour flight back to Miami. I don't remember a single second of it. You'd think a man like me, captain of a cruise ship, seasoned in chaos, calm under pressure, would have some blueprint for how to handle that kind of betrayal. I didn't. There's no training for this. No protocol. No script in the captain's manual. Just silence. And freefall. The message came in halfway through the flight from a neighbor back home. You need to come back. It's about your wife. And your father. That's all it said. No punctuation. No elaboration. Just a blunt collision of names that didn't belong in the same sentence. Elise. And my father. I read it once. Then again. Then again. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Some confusion. Maybe he had a heart attack. Maybe Elise called for help. Maybe she'd gone to check on him. They were close, in a surface level, nothing to see here kind of way. My wife always made an effort with my family. She called him Commander, like I did when I was a kid. Called my mom every Sunday just to ask about her garden. Elise was sweet that way. Or so I believed. I sat frozen in my aisle seat, bourbon sweating in my hand, with an entire plane full of strangers watching sitcom reruns and flipping through Sky Mall catalogs like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. The sky was clear when we landed. Miami was hot and loud, just like always. None of it matched what I felt inside. I took a cab from the airport, told the driver nothing. Just gave him my address in Coral Gables and stared straight ahead while he made small talk. I'd come home a day early. Surprise her. That was the plan. We'd just wrapped a 12-day voyage through the Caribbean. I'd stood on the bridge for hours each night, guiding our floating palace past glittering islands, thinking about how happy Elise would be to see me walk through the door unannounced. I even bought her a stupid little gift in Curacao, a sea glass pendant. She loved handmade jewelry. Now I just kept fingering the box in my pocket like it was a live grenade. When I got to the house, her car was in the driveway. My father's wasn't. But I knew the old man often walked home from the community center where he still volunteered. Said it kept his blood moving. Retired Navy, 65 years old, and still sharper than most men half his age. I stood at the front door for a full minute before knocking. I didn't want to believe it. Even with that text. Even with the tightness in my chest that hadn't let go since cruising altitude. It felt like if I waited just a little longer, the truth would rearrange itself into something manageable. But then the door opened, and Elise looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her face dropped, and not in a happy surprise kind of way. She was in one of my old t-shirts, washed out, soft, the one she always said smelled like the ocean. Her hair was damp. No makeup. No bra. That's when the cold started to set in. Nathan, she said, one hand still on the door. Her voice was half a breath. I came back early, I said. I thought I'd surprise you. She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain something, but didn't know where to start. And then, behind her, I heard footsteps, heavier than hers. And that's when I saw him. My father stepped into the hallway behind her, barefoot, wearing a navy blue t-shirt I recognized from a family barbecue 2 summers ago. His eyes met mine. Not shocked. Not guilty. Just resigned. Like he'd already run this scenario 100 times in his head and decided this was the version he'd live with. I didn't say anything. Not a single word. I just turned around and walked back to the car. I couldn't feel my legs. Couldn't breathe right. I started the engine and drove anywhere. Nowhere. I didn't even know where I was headed until I found myself down by the marina, staring out at the horizon like it might offer some kind of answer. It didn't. I spent the next 2 nights on my ship. Not the cruise liner, my own little sailboat, a 30-footer I kept docked for weekend getaways. Slept in the cabin, barely touched the sandwich I bought from the 24-hour Cuban cafe. Didn't call Elise. Didn't call my mom. I just sat there, listening to the creak of the lines in the lap of the water, wondering how the hell the 2 people who were supposed to be my anchor had dragged me under instead. You'd think betrayal would come with some kind of explosion, shouting, broken glass, a confrontation so loud the neighbors call the cops. But this was quiet. This was rot under the floorboards. The kind of damage that doesn't show until everything collapses. The first time I answered a phone, it was my mother. Nathan, please, she said, her voice already trembling. Let me explain. I didn't want to hear it, but I let her talk. She told me she'd walked in on them. She hadn't suspected a thing. My father had told her he was helping Elise with something, an anniversary surprise for me, of all things. But when she came home early from her book club, she heard noises upstairs. She didn't want to believe it. even after she saw it with her own eyes. She told me that. I wanted to think I was imagining it, she said. But it was real. And I forgave him. Those words were like acid. I forgave him. She was crying by then, and I realized she wanted me to say something that would make it easier. But I had nothing to give. I didn't speak to Elise for another week. She showed up at the dock once, waited for me on the pier like some desperate shoreline statue. She looked smaller than I remembered. Eyes swollen. Makeup smudged. She tried to explain, of course. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely. I missed you. He was there. That line almost made me laugh. He was there. So was the refrigerator. So was the damn dog. But somehow she hadn't slept with them. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't insult her. I just asked one question. How long? Her lips trembled. She hesitated. Once, she whispered. Just once. I looked her dead in the eye. You don't crawl into someone's bed by accident, Elise. She cried. Begged. Promised therapy. Begged for time. I walked past her and untied my lines. That was the last time I looked her in the face. I knew then that this wasn't just about the act. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about the betrayal itself. It was about the fact that they both chose to tear something sacred apart for nothing. And neither of them had the courage to even come clean. I spent most of the following months drifting through routine like a ghost in my own life. Show up. Captain the ship. Smile for guests. Take photos with kids who thought I was some kind of sea god. Then come home to silence. But something inside me had already started turning. Not with rage. With precision. Because when people tear your world apart with quiet cruelty, you don't scream. You don't burn it down in public. You rebuild in silence, and you make damn sure they feel it later. The thing about being betrayed by your father and your wife in the same breath is that your whole sense of reality starts to flicker. It's like standing in a room where the lights keep blinking on and off. You see things, then you don't, and eventually you stop trusting your eyes altogether. I started questioning everything. Not just them. Myself. How long had it been going on? What signs had I missed? Were there glances I'd ignored? Jokes I hadn't understood at the time? Elise used to tease him about his Navy posture, called him Admiral sometimes, in front of me, with a wink. I used to think it was harmless. Cute, even. Now I wondered if she was testing the waters. Seeing how close she could swim to the reef before the hole tore open. I couldn't stand to be in the house. The walls felt contaminated. Every room whispered things I didn't want to hear. So I moved into a short-term rental above a bait shop near the marina. Nothing fancy. One room, faded couch, peeling linoleum, and the faint but constant smell of shrimp and seawater. It was perfect. Every night, after docking whatever cruise I'd captained that week, I'd come back to that little box and sit on the roof with a beer. No music. No phone. Just the creaking of sailboats and their slips and the distant hum of late-night engines heading out to fish. Sometimes I stared up at the stars so long they started to blur. My mother stopped calling for a while. Maybe she could feel the distance growing. Or maybe she finally realized some bridges don't burn. They just fall into the ocean. When she finally did reach out again, it was in a letter. Actual pen on paper. I stared at the envelope for 3 days before I opened it. It was short. Nathan, I don't know how to live in this house without you. I can't fix what happened, but I want you to know I still believe in you. I hope one day, when the pain dulls, we can find our way back. Love. Mom. There was no mention of Elise. Or my father. Just me. That almost hurt more. I saw my father once. It wasn't planned. He showed up at the dock. Wore the same old khakis he used to wear when he taught me how to splice lines. His gait was a little slower now. Back stiff. Still upright. But you could tell time was finally starting to chip away at the man who'd once seemed unbreakable. He didn't say my name. Just stood there, looking out at the water like he was the one who'd been wronged. Like he'd come to offer some pearl of wisdom that would make everything right again. I thought you'd understand, he said finally. After all the years I gave, the years I lost. I stared at him. You didn't lose years, I said. You abandoned them. He looked like he wanted to respond. But instead, he just nodded. Once. And walked away. I watched his back shrink into the distance, and it hit me. That was probably the last time I'd ever see my father. And I didn't feel a thing. People say betrayal is like a knife in the back. That's not true. A knife cuts fast. You feel it. You scream. You bleed. This felt more like drowning in cold water. At first, it's just shock. Then numbness. And finally, the quiet realization that no one's coming to pull you out. Elise sent flowers. Then texts. Then a handwritten note. The last line read, If I could take it back, I would. But she didn't. And she couldn't. And some acts tear holes too wide to stitch shut. I didn't respond. I didn't block her, either. Let her words sit in the digital void, unread. Let her wonder if I'd seen them. Let her wonder if she still existed in my world, or if I'd erased her like chalk from a ship's deck after rain. She had no idea how far I was already drifting. Friends tried to reach out. A few from the cruise line, a couple from college. Even Diana, the same neighbor who'd sent the original message, invited me for dinner once, said she just wanted to talk. I declined. I didn't need comfort. I needed distance. I needed silence wide enough to hear the truth echo back at me. Because the truth was, this betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about what it revealed. That I'd spent years loving people who could destroy me without flinching. That the family I believed in, the marriage I built, the legacy I thought I was carrying forward, they weren't just gone. They'd never really existed. Not the way I imagined them. And now, I had to figure out what I was without them. I kept working. The cruise industry doesn't wait for your heart to mend. You've got itineraries, passengers, deadlines, weather reports. I kept my schedule full: Bahamas, Cozumel, St. Kitts, Nassau. Bright places full of sun and smiling tourists who had no idea the man steering their floating paradise was trying not to fall apart. I'd wake at dawn, run drills with the crew, shake hands with newlyweds and retirees, then disappear into my private quarters and sit in silence, eyes locked on the radar screen long after we docked safely. Some nights, I stood alone on the bridge, staring at the sea so long I started to forget what land looked like. On one of those voyages, maybe 6 months after the collapse, I met a woman named Joanna. She was traveling solo. Accountant from Denver. Bookish. Quiet. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried a worn paperback wherever she went. I only spoke to her once, when she asked me a question about the ship's navigation system. We talked for 15 minutes. She smiled once, then walked away. I never saw her again. But that night, I dreamed I was sitting across from someone in a quiet cabin, snow falling outside, fire crackling, and no history between us. I woke up with tears on my cheeks. It wasn't love. It wasn't longing. It was grief. Grief for the life I never really had. By late fall, the holidays started to creep in. Stores decorated early. Strings of lights wrapped palm trees in the marina. Christmas music leaked from every speaker. And one morning, I found a card wedged under my door. No envelope. Just a folded piece of thick white cardstock. Front. Come home for Christmas. Inside. We'll cook your favorites. We miss you. Love. Mom and Dad. They signed it together. I laughed. A bitter, breathless thing that didn't feel like laughter at all. Then I lit a match, held it to the edge of the card, and watched the flames eat it whole. Let them set their table for 3. I'd already charted a new course. There's a moment right after a ship stops moving. Engines powered down, lines tied off, anchor holding. And yet, for a minute or two, the water still rocks you. Gentle. Familiar. Like the ocean hasn't realized the journey's over. That's how it felt in the months after the card. I wasn't drifting anymore. But I hadn't started moving forward either. Just stillness and silence. But under that silence, something was forming. My days settled into ritual. Early morning runs along the dock. Briefings with the crew. Smiles for the passengers. Then evenings on my sailboat, watching the water and letting my mind go blank. I wasn't mourning anymore. Not really. That storm had passed. Now I was emptying. Like I'd spent the first half of my life filling up with stories and expectations and people, and now I was pouring it all out to make room for something I couldn't name yet. It wasn't rage. That would have been easy. It was colder than that. Cleaner. One morning, a deckhand named Luis asked if I was seeing anyone new. I shook my head. He laughed. Man like you? Captain of the ship? You could have a woman in every port. I didn't respond. Not because I was offended, but because he wasn't wrong. The opportunities were there. Plenty of single passengers. Plenty of subtle invitations. A hand on my arm. A key card passed like a secret. I never took any of them up on it. But I started noticing who I noticed. A bartender in St. Thomas with a crooked smile and a tattoo of a heron on her wrist. A marine biologist who boarded one of our cruises to give a lecture on coral reef conservation, quiet, sharp-eyed, unbothered by crowds. A divorcee from Oregon who danced alone on the top deck one night while the band played 70s soul. They weren't Elise. That was the point. I wasn't chasing comfort. I was learning what it meant to see women as strangers again. Not lovers. Not betrayers. Just people. I still hadn't spoken to my father. or my mother. Not even on her birthday, which used to be sacred. I saw her missed call, watched it ring out, then placed the phone screen down and poured another drink. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't punishment. It was survival. My world had cracked open, and they were still trying to hand me Band-Aids like nothing had really changed. But I wasn't bleeding anymore. I was rebuilding, and I couldn't build on top of rot. By spring, I started sailing out alone. Not for work, just for myself. I'd point the bow toward open water and drift for hours. Sometimes overnight. Just me, the stars, and the hum of the waves brushing against fiberglass. I kept a weather radio on, of course. I wasn't reckless. But I started turning off my phone. No alerts. No voices. No ghosts. There's something deeply honest about the sea. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't flatter. If a storm is coming, it shows you. If your line's about to snap, it sings in the wind. You either listen, or you get wrecked. One night, maybe 20 miles off the coast, I sat up on deck under a sky so clear it felt unreal. No clouds. No light pollution. Just stars, millions of them, like silver dust. And for the first time in months, I said something out loud. Just one word. Why? Not whispered. Not shouted. Just spoken, like a question tossed into the dark. Why him? Why her? Why me? The sea, of course, didn't answer. But something in me shifted. Because in that moment, I realized the question no longer needed answering. What mattered was what came next. The next day, I walked into a brokerage office on Miracle Mile. A guy named Dale, a former merchant mariner who now dealt boats, offered me coffee and asked what I was looking for. Something older, I said. Steel hull. Maybe Alaskan built. Doesn't need to be pretty. Just dependable. He raised an eyebrow. That's pretty specific, Captain. I shrugged. I've got something in mind. He showed me a few listings. I took notes. Asked about transport costs. Didn't buy anything, not yet. But I was planting seeds. And Elise? She didn't know any of this. She'd gone quiet lately. Maybe she'd finally realized the apology tour wasn't coming. Or maybe she'd found someone else to call commander. Didn't matter. She was a closed chapter. I wasn't looking to turn the page. I was writing a new book entirely. That summer, I took 3 months off. Unpaid leave. The cruise line didn't love it, but I'd earned the goodwill. They gave me a soft out, no official goodbye, just an extended break with the promise of let us know when you're ready to return. I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure I would. I didn't have a plan yet. Not really. But I kept thinking about that one trip to Juneau when I was a kid. Me, 10 years old, bundled in a red parka too big for my body, watching snowflakes land on the harbor ice like tiny stars. I remembered a man on a crab boat, big beard, rough voice, laughing with his crew as they hauled traps over the rail. I remember thinking, that's a man who belongs to himself. Not the sea, not the world, not even a name, just himself. People always ask where turning points happen. In hospitals, in courtrooms, on the side of the road. Mine happened on a sailboat under stars, with no witnesses and no fanfare. Just a decision so quiet, it didn't even feel like a decision. I was going to disappear. Not out of pain, out of purpose. But first, I needed to finish what had begun. I hadn't spoken a word of revenge. Not yet. Not even to myself. But I'd spent my whole life learning how to read tides. And this one was rising. They never saw it coming. Not because I was sneaky. Because I was silent. And people like Elise and my father, people who confuse forgiveness with inevitability, they think if you go quiet, you're either broken or planning to come back. But I wasn't broken. And I sure as hell wasn't coming back. By late summer, I had mapped out every detail. I flew back to Miami on a commercial flight, middle seat, no fanfare. Wore jeans, a plain t-shirt, and sunglasses I didn't take off even in the terminal. No one at the marina recognized me. I didn't want them to. I stayed in a modest hotel 2 neighborhoods away from where Elise and I used to live. Our old home was now hers, at least physically. But legally? That was about to change. Everything was already in motion. I'd spent months preparing papers filed, signatures notarized, lawyers briefed, accounts frozen behind high walls of compliance. It wasn't vindictive. It was precise. The first thing I did was walk past my old condo. Not to go in. Just to look. I wanted to see how she was living without me. The Range Rover was still there, but it had a boot on the front tire. The grass was overgrown. A delivery box had been sitting outside for days, rain-warped and splitting at the corners. The blinds were drawn, but there was a flicker of blue light from a TV behind the curtains. She was still inside the life I'd built, still sitting in it like it belonged to her. I almost felt bad. Almost. The next morning, Elise was served. Not with a lawsuit. Not with alimony demands. With a final notice from my attorney, the condo was being sold. She had 30 days to vacate. The prenup, which she signed without reading, confident in my love, was airtight. Especially the fidelity clause. Infidelity, proven and documented, nullified her claim to everything. All I needed was confirmation of the affair. And thanks to her refusal to deny it, plus the messages I'd retrieved from her phone backup, I had what I needed. Photos. Logs. Even a journal entry she'd emailed to herself, titled, "What I Did and How I'll Make It Right." She'd written it to unburden herself. She never thought I'd read it. I didn't demand restitution. Didn't ask for money. I just made sure she had nothing of mine left. No access to my accounts, no use of my name, no more legal tether to the life she'd violated. She'd chosen the betrayal. Now she'd live with the silence. As for my father, he got no papers, no letters, no confrontation. He got absence. I had, for most of my adult life, supplemented my parents' income quietly. My mom knew. My dad pretended not to. I paid off their second mortgage, helped with utilities, covered the occasional medical bill. I stopped. Cold turkey. They had enough to survive. But the comfort they'd grown used to, that vanished. My mother reached out through a church friend, asking if we could talk. I ignored it. I'd already spoken to her. Spoken in a language of consequences. After the sale of the condo, Elise tried calling me. 6 missed calls in 2 hours. Then a text. "You don't have to do this. I know I messed up. But this feels like punishment." I didn't respond. Because it wasn't punishment. It was clarity. It was me removing her from the foundation of my life like rot from a hull. If you leave it, the whole thing sinks eventually. With the money from the condo sale and some other liquidations I'd been planning quietly for years, I bought something no one in Miami could ever imagine me owning. A crab boat. Steel frame. Alaskan built. 54 feet of unapologetic muscle. She'd been docked in Kodiak for years, working season after season through storms that would break lesser men. Her owner, a tough bastard named Gary, was retiring. Said he'd lost a toe to frostbite and took it as a sign. I paid him in full. No financing. No questions. She needed a new name. I gave her one. Line breaker. The cold had always called to me. Even as a child, I preferred the cold to the heat. While other kids ran barefoot through sprinklers, I was the weird one watching documentaries on polar storms and icebreakers. I'd begged my parents to take me to Alaska when I was 10. We'd gone for 5 days. That was the happiest I'd ever seen myself in a photo. So I left Miami. For good. No farewell dinners. No airport send-off. No last looks. Just one last walk across the marina. One last look at the place I'd tried to build something real, and then a silent, deliberate departure. The first months up north were brutal. Learning crab fishing wasn't just a job. It was war. Every trap felt like a battle. Every hull a gamble. The cold cut deep and didn't apologize. Ice formed on my beard, the deck, even the ropes. But the crew respected me not because of my past, but because I showed up. I pulled my weight. I never complained. I rebuilt myself in that cold. One busted knuckle at a time. That winter, a camera crew from the Discovery Channel came through town. They were filming a segment on independent crabbers. Somehow my name came up. They asked for an interview. Called me, the crew's captain who turned cold. I gave them sound bites. Nothing personal. Just weather stories, crab talk, engine repairs. They kept trying to dig for my past. Why I left. Why I chose this. I just smiled and said, "The sea's honest." That's all. They ran the segment. I never watched it. Christmas came. A card arrived in the mail. White envelope. Neat handwriting. From my parents. "We miss you. We'll be home for Christmas. There's always a seat for you. Love, Mom." I held it in my hand for a long time, then tossed it into the stove and watched it burn. I wasn't angry anymore. Not bitter. Not broken. Just free. I'd built a new life. One no one else owned. No wife clinging to status. No father expecting loyalty. No family name demanding legacy. Just me. My boat. My crew. And the cold, endless sea. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like waking up one morning and realizing there's no one left to disappoint and no one left to lie to. You just get up, breathe in the cold, and start the engine. That's what my life became in Alaska. Simple. Brutal. Beautiful. Mine. I didn't plan to sleep with anyone at first. I figured I'd spend the next decade knee-deep in crab guts, covered in ice, half-frozen and alone, letting time do its quiet work on my memory. But something changes when no one owns you anymore. You become lighter. And women noticed. There were a lot of women in Kodiak, strong, strange, beautiful in the way glaciers are beautiful. Sharp angles. No pretense. They didn't ask about where I came from. They didn't want a backstory. They just wanted company that didn't come with a leash. And I gave it. There was Talia, a former Coast Guard mechanic with a jawline like a carving knife and hands that could fix anything. We drank whiskey in her garage and talked about engines until one night turned into 3. There was Maria, a wildlife photographer who docked for a few weeks on assignment. She smelled like cedarwood and smoked fish. We shared a sleeping bag during a blizzard and didn't speak after the thaw. Then there was Amani. She didn't stay the night. Not once. Always left just before dawn, like it was a rule she'd made with herself. But she laughed with her whole face, and for a while, that was enough. I never brought any of them on the line breaker. That was my space. Sacred. Untouched by the past or the present. A man needs at least one place in this world where no one else has ever cried. The work was punishing. Hauling traps in the dark, in temperatures that made your teeth ache inside your jaw. One crewman lost 2 toes. Another fell and cracked his ribs. We buried a third, heart attack, age 49. Crabbing doesn't care about your backstory. The ocean doesn't pause for your grief. But out there, I found clarity I'd never felt in Miami. On the bridge of a luxury cruise ship, you're a diplomat, a host, a performer in a white uniform. On a crab boat, you're just real. You eat what you catch. You fix what breaks. You rest when the weather lets you. And no one cares what your last name is. Some nights, I sat out on deck alone after the crew turned in. The sea always sounded different at 2 a.m., less like waves, more like breath. Like something alive, keeping its distance but watching you closely. I never spoke to it. But sometimes, I felt it answering questions I hadn't asked out loud. You're okay now. You did what you had to do. They made their choices. You made yours. The Discovery Channel segment aired that spring. I only knew because the crew started calling me Captain Ghost. Someone online had written a post about me. Former luxury cruise captain now hauls crab in Alaska, won't say why. It went mini-viral. They wanted to film more. A producer emailed, offering a solo docuseries. I declined. Not because I didn't want the attention, but because I didn't know my story to anyone else anymore. Let the world wonder. The truth didn't live online. It lived in the frost of my beard, the ache in my knuckles, the silence I'd carved out for myself like a cave in a glacier. Then, one morning in December, just before the solstice, I got another letter. No return address. Just my name, written in neat blue ink. Inside. It's been 3 years. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know. I left him. Not for you. Not for us. Just because I realized I didn't know who I was anymore. I'm working at a shelter. I make coffee for people who have nothing. Maybe that's what I needed all along, to know what nothing feels like. I hope you're warm. B. That was it. No apologies. No begging. Just a strange kind of honesty I hadn't seen in her before. I sat with the letter for a long time. Folded it. Unfolded it. Read it again. I didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel pity. Just distance. She was a name now. A chapter title. Not a storm. I placed the letter in a drawer next to some old fishing licenses and a picture of the line breaker during her first full haul. Then I went outside. It was snowing. Light flakes, soft and slow. The kind of snow that makes you stop and notice the way it covers everything equal and clean. Even the sharp edges. Later that week, my mom called. First time in years. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I know you're doing well. I saw the clip. You looked strong. Your father's not the same. I'm not calling to ask you to come back. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I should have protected you better. I see that now. That's all. She didn't cry. Didn't stretch it out. Just hung up. I didn't delete it. But I didn't save it either. Christmas Eve came. The crew made chili in the galley. Someone brought out a busted old guitar, and we sang sea shanties so bad the seals on the harbor barked back. At midnight, I went up to the bridge. Alone. I looked out over the frozen water and raised a glass of bourbon to the dark. To everything that stayed, I said quietly. Then I finished it. And whispered. And everything that didn't. I used to think healing meant going back. Back to the people. Back to the places. Back to the version of myself that existed before the wreck. But now I know better. Healing isn't a return. It's an arrival. And this quiet life surrounded by snow, sea, and silence, this is where I arrived. I bought a plot of land outside Kodiak. Not much, just a few acres tucked between evergreens and a slope that gives me a view of the harbor when the clouds clear. Built a cabin there. Nothing fancy. Steel roof. Thick walls. A wood stove that never stops crackling in the winter. I built it with my hands. With help from locals who didn't ask what I'd done before or why my past looked like a blank slate. Out here, no one's interested in your resume. Out here, the only things that matter are what you can haul, what you can fix, and who shows up when the weather turns. I sleep better now. Dream less. Eat slower. Laugh more. Sometimes I go 2 weeks without checking my phone. Sometimes I get a call from someone back in Florida and let it ring just to hear the past knock. Then I put the phone back on the shelf and go oil the winch or sharpen my blades. That's the thing about peace. It doesn't demand your attention. It waits. The line breaker is still mine. She's seen 6 seasons now. We've hauled more crab than I can count, blown 2 engines, survived 1 rogue wave that nearly took my ribs and my deckhand's shoulder with it. But she holds. That boat has become more than steel and rope. She's a shrine. To survival. To self-respect. To the version of me that finally walked away and never once turned around to explain why. Every now and then, someone from the Discovery Channel calls, still trying to pitch a solo feature. They say things like, audiences love mystery. The captain who vanished. There's power in that. Your story could inspire people. And maybe it could. But I always tell them the same thing. The story's mine. That's why it matters. And then I hang up. Not because I'm bitter. Because I'm free. I still get letters sometimes. From Elise. 3 total, over 2 years. Each one's softer than the last. Less like a lifeline. More like a bottle tossed into the ocean. She never asks for money. Never asks for me back. Just updates. Admissions. Reflections. In the last one, she wrote, I used to think love was something you held on to no matter what. Now I know. Some love only teaches you how to let go. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw it away either. Some things deserve to be remembered, not out of sentiment, but out of truth. The closest thing I have to a family now is my crew. And the town. A kid named Richie, who brings me smoked salmon in exchange for stories about the open sea. An older woman named Mags who cuts my hair and always pretends she's going to leave it long, then shaves the back anyway because you're not some California hipster, Nathan. Evenings are full. Quiet, but full. Books. Woodwork. The occasional storm that rattles the windows and makes me feel alive in the most honest way. And sometimes, someone stays the night. No expectations. No promises. Just shared warmth. And silence. The kind that says, you're here. I'm here. That's enough. I never remarried. Never wanted to. Marriage was something I gave fully, once. It was violated fully, once. That was enough. I don't carry hate for Elise anymore. Or my father. They are who they are. And I'm no longer part of that story. But I will say this. I hope they're honest with themselves now. I hope they understand the weight of what they chose. Because I do. I carry it with me every day. Not as a burden. As armor. One winter night, I stood on the deck of the line breaker long after the crew had gone below. Snow was falling so gently it felt like forgiveness. The sea was calm. Stars overhead, cold and clear as cut glass. And for the first time in a long time, I said something out loud. Not a question. Just this. I'm glad it happened. Because I was. Not for the pain. Not for the betrayal. But for the aftermath. For what it stripped away. For what it forced me to see. For the man it revealed. So here I am. 45 years old. A crab fisherman. A former captain. A man with nothing left to prove and no one left to explain himself to. I live in the cold now. I breathe it in. I let it shape me, season after season. And when people ask why I left, why I stayed, why I don't go back, I just smile and say, some men were built for the heat. Others were made for the storm.